You may have seen many manipulation tricks before, but the 7 tricks we are going to talk about today are extremely deep and are drawn from the darkest layers of dark psychology. These are the same psychological tactics that were used repeatedly in shows like Squid Game, and in reality, we experience them in our daily lives without even realizing it. Ready? Let's dive in. 1. Controlled choice. You're presented with multiple options. You think you're deciding for yourself, but every option leads to the same result, just in different packaging. The goal is to make you feel in control while guiding you to a set outcome. This is managed consent, not freedom. Here's what this looks like in practice. In Squid Game, players are told they volunteered. In reality, their desperation narrowed their choices so far that opting in became the only real path. They thought they decided freely, but the game chose for them long before that. 2. Trust as leverage. Trust is necessary in any relationship, personal, professional, social, but once trust is gained, it can be redirected. After someone proves themselves as dependable, their requests are questioned less. Doubt decreases, skepticism drops. People give them the benefit of the doubt, sometimes against their own judgment. This allows influence without resistance. The manipulator doesn't need to persuade with facts anymore. They just need to maintain the image of being reliable. Once that image is in place, they can move people with very little effort. It's not emotional manipulation in the traditional sense. It's structural. They rely on your belief in their character to bypass your critical thinking. This kind of setup happens more often than you'd think. A friendly team lead at a tech company builds rapport with junior staff. Once everyone trusts her, she slowly starts shifting extra tasks onto them. Just this week, no one pushes back. Not because they agree, but because she's the one asking. 3. Gradual self-editing. Influence doesn't always look like control. Often it looks like adaptation. Someone enters a new environment. They adjust, slightly. They avoid certain opinions. They reword how they speak. They stop expressing some preferences not because they were told to, but because they feel it's expected. This happens in jobs, social groups, online spaces. Over time, these small changes become the norm, and the original behavior disappears. The person forgets that they once acted differently. They've rewritten themselves to fit the environment. This is often described as growth or maturity, but when it's not chosen freely, it's not either. It's quiet pressure, absorbed and followed without question. Let me give you a situation that shows this clearly. A university student joins a high-status debate club. At first, he speaks casually, but after a few raised eyebrows, he starts copying the tone and views of senior members. A semester later, he no longer recognizes how he used to think. 4. Induced division. It's easier to control a group when it's fragmented, and you don't need force to fragment it. You just need to highlight differences repeatedly. This could be beliefs, status, language, background. The content doesn't matter. The effect is what counts. Separation, tension, tribal loyalty. Once a group is split, they begin to focus inward. Each side treats the other as opposition. They argue, isolate, compete. Meanwhile, whoever created the split stays out of focus. This method is efficient because it works passively. You don't have to keep manipulating. You just start the conflict and let it continue on its own. People become too distracted with each other to question the system that benefits from the division. Here's how it quietly works in real life. In a startup, leadership gives 2 departments conflicting goals and limited resources. Each team blames the other for delays. While they argue over workload, management avoids accountability and tightens control during the chaos. 5. Crisis leverage. People in stable situations are harder to influence, but when someone is under stress, financially, socially, emotionally, they become flexible. This is when offers are made, not to help, but to gain control. The exchange feels like support, but it's conditional. The return is usually much greater than what was given. Manipulators don't need to create the crisis. They just need to be ready when one happens. Let's look at how this plays out. A landlord offers a rent reduction during a job crisis, but only if the tenant agrees to sign a long-term lease with strict penalties. The tenant accepts under pressure, not realizing how much flexibility they just gave away. 6. Behavior monitoring. When people are observed, they behave differently. This doesn't need to be said, it just needs to be known. If someone is aware they're being watched, online, in public, or in a group. They begin to adjust their behavior, not because they're told to, but because they expect judgment or consequence. This creates a form of self-enforcement. People avoid expressing disagreement. They repeat approved phrases. They avoid standing out. It becomes more about being safe than being honest. Surveillance doesn't have to punish. The possibility alone is enough to shape behavior. This turns internal thought into managed performance, without direct instruction. Here's one way it happens. A teacher tells students their webcam must stay on during remote class. Over time, even in silence, students start nodding, smiling, and reacting politely. Not because they feel it, but because they know they're visible. 7. Imitation of fairness. Manipulation is most effective when it looks fair. If a system appears neutral and consistent, people are more likely to accept its outcomes, even when they're unequal. This is not about breaking rules. It's about controlling the structure that decides what the rules mean and when they apply. Standards are used selectively. Accountability is demanded from some, ignored for others. Processes are followed in form, but not in function. When people object, the defense is procedural. We followed the system. Even if the system is designed to favor one side, this gives the appearance of fairness. The result may be biased, but the method looks clean. That's why people don't resist. It doesn't look corrupt. It looks professional. You might recognize this pattern. 2 employees break the same rule. One gets a warning. The other is quietly pushed out. When questioned, HR shows the same policy, but only one of them had a history that made the policy applicable. The bias hides behind process. These 7 methods don't rely on threats, violence, or loud commands. They rely on control of environment, timing, and perception. They guide choices by managing the options. They reduce resistance by appearing supportive. They reshape identity through repetition. They block collective strength through division. They strike when people are vulnerable. They control behavior without saying a word, and they avoid challenge by hiding behind procedure. This is manipulation at its most effective. Not visible, but functional. Not dramatic, but consistent. Once you can see it clearly, it loses power. It only works when it goes unnoticed.